Oh my god! Oh my god! What am I gonna do? Yoon from Street Fighter is coming this way right now. He's gonna murder me for food for some reason, and I have no way to defend myself!
With the exception, of course, of the Orb of
I
Chaos.
have no way to defend myself!
How did you pass the trial of intelligence again?
Oh, by doing a... Wait, that's it!
What?
I did a commentary! That'll get me out of this situation.
Hey, Boon. Heard you say you were gonna do a commentary. Mind if I be your avatar for it?
I don't know. It's pretty anime related.
I can do political. I have a skateboard, eh?
This is true? Tell you what. I'll go over the script with you and let you decide if you're up for it.
I don't see why not.
Fantastic! Have you ever heard of Mother's Basement?
Oh?
Fantastic! Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to introduce Mother's Basement, the third biggest channel that I've covered in Boon canon, and an anime YouTuber who said this at the beginning of this particular video.
I'm pretty sure that I'm literally the only human being on Earth who cares about card game anime, and it's probably not wise of me to drop a 15-minute rant about it in the middle of the worst month for ad revenue of the year, but I just put out an SAO video, so I think I'll be okay.
Well, sir, you'd be incorrect. Not only has this video gotten a view count close to your number of subscribers in the first week, indicating that it's a subject matter that your audience is interested in, but there's also the fact that the video has other problems to be more concerned about. Let me explain exactly what I mean while I ramble on for about 30 minutes on the subject that I wasn't expecting to ever get to cover in a commentary.
Card game anime all kind of suck. Or at least they suck at being anime about card games. I mean, there's plenty of goofy fun to be had with shows like Yu-Gi-Oh!, Duel Masters, Luck and Logic, Wii Cross, Fantasista Dolls, ZX Ignition, Dinosaur King, Moncole Knights, and Jesus fucking Christ, how many of these are there?
And here's your first problem. While some of these, there's really no disputing, are card game anime, some of the anime you're listing aren't really card game anime, just anime that happen to have card games. So first there's Luck and Logic. Look, I know this can be really confusing given Bushiroad's other work that definitely is going to come up later, but nothing in the Luck and Logic anime even mentions cards at all. Well, true, they were made with the intent of being part of the same franchise as a card game. That's kind of like saying Dot Hack Sign is a card game anime. There's a card game that's an intentional part of the franchise, yes, but that doesn't make Dot Hack Sign about card games. Fantasista Dolls is one I haven't seen that does use a card game as part of its appeal that I personally never watched because shoujo just isn't really my thing. But that being said, it doesn't have a card game. That's gonna be real relevant later. ZX Ignition, Moncole Knights, and Dinosaur King all share the distinction of being based on a card game in some capacity, although Moncole Knights is technically not, but let's not make this more complicated than it already is. These are the ones that actually are what you're describing, in spite of a lot of people not knowing them. I'm also going to use them against you in just a moment.
For glorified commercials, these shows range from serviceable to pretty gosh darn great shonen and shoujo fantasy fare, but I don't think they really accurately represent the appeal of the card games that they're supposed to be selling us. In fact, I don't think that any card game anime properly conveys the fun of playing trading card games, at least not in its entirety.
You do have a partial point that card game anime tend to shy away from the aspects you're talking about. Allow me to shoot your glorified commercials argument in the foot multiple times with the shows you just listed. So first of all, there's Yu-Gi-Oh!, which was not originally made to be about the card game, but instead have more of a game of the week formula to it. The card game became the most popular aspect and they just stuck with it. Hell, the entire premise is built around games in general and the pharaoh inside the Millennium Puzzle being able to win them. There's a reason the show isn't called Duel Monsters, which is the actual name of the game in the show. And you know what I was saying about Fantasista Dolls earlier? How there's no card game yet? Yeah, that's like getting on a Kamen Rider Ryuki for not being strictly about a card game, my dude. As for the other series I mentioned that are shows based on card games, I'd like to inform you why these series that actually could be considered glorified commercials don't depict the card game just being played as normal. To put it simply, that's not how creating a show to sell toys works. Think about shows like G.I. Joe for a second. If it were being accurate to the fun of playing with the action figures, then the focus of the story wouldn't be on the GIs themselves, but more on their command. But if that were the case, then we wouldn't be invested enough in the people they're commanding to buy those figures. You sell a product with a TV show not by showing people using that product, but by expanding the viewer's imagination when using the product. This is going to be one of your later problems with the genre, but we'll cross that bridge.
There's this formula that many battle toy anime follow. You start by having your characters play small games for 2 to 3 episodes, then you send them to a tournament that lasts for the rest of the core or season, and during that tournament they discover some dark, secret, mystical evil that they conveniently need to use many collectible variations of your toy that you are selling to defeat and save the world. This formula works, it makes for really entertaining kids TV, but the trouble is that it really has nothing to do with the product. I mean, you can literally use the same basic structure to make it exciting to watch bread rise. Someone did, actually, and it's great. You can sub out this formula for something different. Moncole Knights puts a comedy isekai Pokemon spin on card collecting, while WeCross turns it into one of those magical girl Faustian bargain with the devil deals, which is actually really good. But the underlying issue remains. By putting the focus of your card game anime on something other than the card game, you're implicitly saying this thing is not interesting enough to carry a TV show on its own.
What I can't help but hear from this is that an escalation of stakes beyond what would normally be in the game itself is bad because it's not in the game. Dude, it's fine if you prefer slice of life shows, but this seems like a really clickbaity way to say, I would like to see a slice of life card game anime. And you know what, you're right. To a certain extent, a card game story without any fantasy elements can be interesting without all the flashy save the world stuff thrown in. But I'll get to why your own suggestion contradicts itself further along.
But the thing is, TCGs are really fun on their own. Take this from someone who was obsessed with Yu-Gi-Oh! And then Hearthstone for a good 4 years of his life. There's so much strategy and thought that goes into building your deck into a well-oiled machine and piloting it against other players who've done the same. Enough that I honestly think you could build a whole series out of it. What is this X factor that's missing from so many TCG anime? What is it that makes card games so uniquely enjoyable? In a word, planning. Rather than being won in the moment of play, the outcomes of TCG duels are largely decided by the foresight and strategy of players before a game or tournament even begins. But actually collecting cards and building decks is rarely, if ever, touched on in these shows.
Oh wait, I'm sorry, did you just show a clip of Buddy Fight while you said that? That's unfortunate. Yeah, didn't you also bring up Moncole Knights having comedy Pokemon bent to it? What is it that makes it like Pokemon again? Oh yeah, that's right, collection! But, you know, you're probably wondering why showing a clip of Buddy Fight is so relevant to this discussion. Gee, I don't know, maybe because of how important collecting new cards becomes in that series? Especially considering the fact that they have a character whose entire purpose on the team is to be a deck builder? That wasn't even in the script. I can't believe I forgot to put that shit in the script. Holy fuck! And you get onto these shows for being formulaic with the tournament setup, but the fact of the matter is that the collection focus can lead to a much bigger problem. Instead of the whole series following a formula that other shows have followed, you have individual episodes that follow the same formula over and over again, or at least 2 or 3 episode arcs that are mostly the same. Let me walk you through it. Main character finds out about a card they need. Main character begins searching for the card they need, likely asking around for it or opening packs. Main character obtains card they need, likely as a result of winning against someone who has it. And as for a plot that uses a daisy chain of trades in order for the person to get what they need, there's a reason that type of story isn't really used anymore, namely because it's been done to death as sitcom plot fodder. Would it be possible for people to make these things interesting? Sure it would, but it's a lot harder than you make it out to be, and the majority would rather make something good that's a bit safer than go out of their way to do something different only to fail. And as for what you said about how card games are decided in the planning stages, I mean, yeah, you do partially have a point, but the real question becomes, are we watching a card game anime at that point? You're going to make a comparison that is actually relevant to what I mean by this in a few moments, so I'll just be forming my mana like this until then. Like 5 people are gonna get what I'm alluding to here, I swear to God.
Who the fuck is the toughest guy in here? That'd be me.
Yu-Gi-Oh! The anime constantly shows that the key to winning a children's card game lies in trusting your deck and believing in the heart of the cards, but that's absolute horseshit. While it may make for a thrilling anime moment to luckily pull the last piece of Exodia from your deck at the last possible moment, that's not really a good strategy for consistently winning games. In reality, anyone playing Exodia is going to stack their deck with as many cards as possible that either stall their opponent, draw more cards, or search for more pieces of Exodia, so that the odds of drawing the complete set go from being fairly low to being almost guaranteed within 3 to 5 turns of the game. They're not going to build a deck full of random monsters like Yugi's grandpa and hope for the best.
Except this was early Yu-Gi-Oh! So, they totally would. Alright, I get what you're saying though. A real player wouldn't throw Exodia into a deck that didn't have a lot of draw power, and instead put the pieces into a deck that had better chance of summoning Exodia. Even though you're comparing a time when the only draw spell was Pot of Greed, which Yugi's grandpa already had in his deck, mind you. And Yugi had Swords of Revealing Light as a stall card, played in that duel to give him more draw steps to get Exodia pieces in his hand. Also, this episode was before the card game was even close to being a thing.
This is something that card game anime rarely ever touch on, but it's essential to playing TCGs well: knowing your win condition. Based on anime, a lot of new players think that winning is just a matter of putting the strongest cards together in a deck and playing them better than your opponent. I know that's what I thought when I first started getting really serious about Yu-Gi-Oh! But in reality, the purpose of your deck isn't to give you access to a wide variety of strong cards or combos. You're really never going to run Dark Magician and Blackluster Soldier in the same deck.
Okay, somebody didn't play Yu-Gi-Oh! In 2002. Yeah, well, modern card game design is like that. Back in the cowboy days, it was just who has the strongest cards, especially in the case of Yu-Gi-Oh! Either strong in terms of effects or strong in terms of numbers. Either way, you're beating your opponent by being able to draw strong cards more often than your opponent. And for that matter, the show even points out that just using monsters is a bad move in one of the first couple of scenes of the entire show, as it's the first piece of advice that Yugi gives Joey about his deck construction. And you're saying the anime doesn't do this? I call bullshit!
Every card that's not directly part of this core strategy should be something that either helps you get to the cards you do need, or shuts down the strategies that your win condition is otherwise weak to. The Yu-Gi-Oh! Anime would have you believe that life points are the most important thing in the world, but any hardcore player of any card game will tell you that the only life point that matters is your last one.
Which, the show does all the time. Life point payment cards are very rarely used in the show, sure, but the typical formula for a duel is that the hero goes down to a ludicrously low number of life points and then makes a comeback to achieve victory. In fact, sacrificing life points, and even monsters, in order to achieve a winning state is in the exact same duel with Kaiba that you're talking about with Exodia. Knowing Dark Magician will wind up getting destroyed by a more powerful monster, Yugi uses his Dark Magician to destroy Kaiba's Judge Man on the second to last turn, because if he didn't do that, he would have lost on his next turn. He also had enough life points that, no matter what Kaiba summoned, he would be able to survive with his Dark Magician getting destroyed. In other words, he didn't care about going to 400 life, he just cared about not going to 0. And this is the primary show that you are criticizing for not representing these things that is doing this. And also, it's the earliest card game anime in existence, so this is the foundational knowledge for the entire fucking genre!
Different card games have many unique quirks and mechanics that set them apart from each other, but one thing is pretty much constant between all of them. 9 times out of 10, the player who draws the most cards and has the most cards in play wins, because that player gets to their win condition faster and has a greater chance of drawing a card that counters their opponent's win condition. This is true to the point that if there was a card in Yu-Gi-Oh! That let you sacrifice all but one of your life points to draw 3 cards, it would be played at 3 in every deck in the game.
No, it wouldn't. Because even though the only life point that matters is your last one, there has to be much more reward for putting yourself that low than only 3 cards. Why? Because all your opponent needs is 1 card to kill you. This is a concept that comes up in Magic the Gathering as well, so I'll start with that example. If I have a shock land and I play it, there's actually a decision behind if I should take 2 damage in order to have it enter untapped. The first part of that decision is if my opponent can deal me direct damage. If I see no reason that they would have red cards in their deck, the answer is probably no, so I don't have a problem putting myself at a low life total. If they have red cards though, I have to think about where my life total currently is, and if it's around half, I have to think about how likely it is that they have the rest of the damage to kill me in their hand. In other words, my life points above 1 matter more because I'm playing against a deck that has a way to take away that life point with just 1 card. In Yu-Gi-Oh!, it's worse, because any deck can use the cards that do this. If they printed what I'm just going to call Pot of Fragility, suddenly Ukazi would be a much more worthwhile card in decks as a hard counter to it. Or, you know, Volcanics would just be tier 0. Either or.
You don't really see those kinds of interactions in most card game anime, though. The whole idea of planned counterplay just isn't present. And that's a real shame because it's one of the most interesting parts of real-world TCGs. In real tournaments, players don't just play one match, they do best of 3s. And in most card games, players have a sideboard of 15 extra cards that they can swap into their deck between rounds in order to have better odds of winning against their opponent's specific strategy. By looking at what decks are the most powerful versus which are the most affordable, you can estimate with a fair degree of accuracy what you're likely to play against at a tournament or at your local card shop, and adjust the cards in your deck to have a better chance of winning against them. And you can build a sideboard containing cards that plug holes in your deck strategy or counter other strategies that you expect to see a little less frequently than the most popular ones.
You know, except most of them. Cardfight Vanguard only got a best of 3 format in August of 2017 and still has no sideboard. Future Card Buddy Fight also got a best of 3 at the same time, but actually does get a sideboard. Luck and Logic does not have a best of 3 format. The Pokemon trading card game, second biggest physical TCG worldwide, mind you, does not have best of 3. I can't speak for Moncoli Knights or WeCross, but using the word all when like half of what you bring up doesn't even work that way? Yeah, that's shady. Oh wait, that's right. You haven't mentioned Vanguard yet, have you?
There's a mind game element to this. Is the opponent who just beat you siding in counters to your counters? Is the guy you just trounced changing his entire strategy into something you have no hope of overcoming? Aside from the initial step of deck building, the side deck is where TCGs are won, and I don't think I've ever seen an anime that incorporates them at all. That's a huge missed opportunity to both create tension and draw out duels without making every turn last forever.
While you have a point that sideboarding and best of 3 would be something interesting to bring to a card game anime, there's a small note of long-lasting duels. While some shows have individual games last kind of excessively long, either through side plots, overusing thought speech, or all their stalling mechanisms that Dragon Ball Z ran into the ground, the majority of the time, games start anywhere from the 5 to 10 minute mark of the episode and last until the last minute or two, resulting in a 10 to 20 minute game, depending on if the episode goes to 20 or 24 minutes. This is actually pretty normal for most card games. Looking at time limit rules in tournaments can tell you the maximum amount of time that a game should be expected to go, and well, generally speaking, it tends to be around 20 minutes for an intense control matchup. So, you know, it's not like what you're talking about is nearly as prevalent as you're making it out to be.
And the thing is, that's the real skill that separates good players from great ones, reading and reacting to the metagame. And there's plenty of interesting ways that could be incorporated into an anime's story. Having characters go scope out their future opponents to get into their heads, or play test games against each other to figure out what decks in a new set are the most powerful.
And a season starting there and then going into a tournament where they use what they learned there is bad. How exactly? Hell, they shouldn't be changing their decks in the middle of a tournament anyway. That's super illegal, you chuckle fuck. Oh, unless you're playing like Duelist Kingdom or Battle City Yu-Gi-Oh, that's different.
Hell, you could build a whole story arc around a character chasing down a card that they need to complete their deck before a tournament, or scrambling to find a replacement when they realize at the last minute that one of their key cards is a bad fit for their deck.
See, I'm inclined to agree with you on this one. These could be interesting stories to incorporate. But an entire story arc built around a 1 to 2 card change, generally speaking, you gain the card you need either by trading for it, buying it, or opening packs until you get it. Cardfight Vanguard spent like 1 to 2 episodes with Aichi hunting down a grade 3 near the beginning, because something like that goes for an entire arc, then it becomes, well, pedestrian. and selling your show on the pedestrian aspects of it is a bad idea.
I mean, if you want to talk about card game moments that would make for great anime episodes, think of that one Yu-Gi-Oh! Tournament where everyone was scrambling to get their hands on Elemental Hero Stratos because he'd just been released and he was totally broken, and he was immediately limited to one afterwards. That could make for a great comedy storyline.
Okay, so you're not entirely wrong about this from an anime perspective. At least this time you're not saying that something revolving around a single card should be an entire story arc, although in this case it could actually be a through line for a story arc involving a tournament. I mean, just think about it. Everybody scrambles for the new busted card. They play the new busted card in the tournament arc. We begin the next arc with that card's banning. The one time you have something that actually does make sense being a full story arc, and you decide that that's the one where you give it a one-off episode. Man. Okay. Now the part about the card game, because that isn't just any tournament you're talking about. This was one of the Shonen Jump Championship Series tournaments, you know, before they became YCS tournaments, which are national level events. It was also only so much of a scramble, since you're forgetting that the card had been out for like half a year already in the OCG, so people already knew that it would be good in this strategy. And that's also why it was hit as fast as it was. I mean, shit, dude, Diamond Dude Turbo isn't even that hard to counter, and considering it was 3 of the top 8 in St. Louis, clearly plenty of people found an answer for it. But it was gonna get hit to 1 anyway. In fact, that's exactly why they released it when they did. At this time, the OCG and TCG lists were synchronized, so they couldn't ban the card until it was printed in the TCG. This card getting released when it was basically an emergency ban.
Or players could even play mind games with each other, trying to outguess each other's strategies and trick other players into using cards that will work against them. That would be a hell of a lot more interesting than, oh no, I am going to lose because my numbers aren't big enough. Oh yay, I drew the exact card I needed not to lose.
Oh, I see. Well, I guess it's time to see if I top deck what I was looking for, and oh, would you look at that cruel ultimatum! That is a huge aspect of this that you just completely discounted, my dude. Gabriel Nassif's Called Shot. Million to 1 Dragon Storm. Just fucking slam it. Hell, all of Alexander Haynes' Pro Tour Avstim Restored, where he used a deck built on a mechanic that's entirely based around drawing the card you need at the exact right time, and won with it. See, yeah, I agree with you that adding more treacherous villains who act like they want to help but purposely hinder the protagonist is an interesting thing that isn't done often. But saying the top deck is less interesting inherently is, well, kinda short-sighted. While having more treacherous plots involve things outside the game does make for an intriguing and more political story element, although that's a point that's about to shoot you in the foot, the fact of the matter is that the planning stages of the TCG aren't what draws a player into the games. It's the more dynamic moments within a game that do that. A skilled player knows how to create those moments all the time, either through using psychological tactics to manipulate what your opponent does, or just knowing your deck well enough to know the card you need that will get you out of this situation. Which, although not as common as games where everyone does things according to plan, knowing how to operate when you're on the back foot is very important. And much like in wrestling, the mark of a good hero in a card game anime is how they give themselves time to reach their answer.
We only see Yugi do anything like this once in the Yu-Gi-Oh! Anime, and it's low-key one of the douchiest things I've ever seen an anime protagonist do. At the start of Duelist Kingdom, Yugi gives Joey Time Wizard, an OP effect monster that serves as a key piece in his strategy by destroying his opponent's monsters and buffing up his baby dragon. What Yugi doesn't tell Joey is that Time Wizard also buffs Dark Magician, giving him an effect that lets Yugi play spell cards from his hand on his opponent's turn like trap cards, which basically means that Dark Magician is a hard counter to Time Wizard. And since Yugi helped Joey build his deck around it, when he goes into the final tournament match with Joey, he knows that it's all but guaranteed that his friend will play Time Wizard, handing the duel to him on a silver platter. He makes this big show about them being on equal footing, but in the end, he had the duel rigged before they even started.
Well, allow me to hard counter this entire point then, because Yugi didn't do jack shit. Yeah, I think the thing you're forgetting is that we have no indication that Yugi knew that Dark Magician was going to become Dark Sage as a result of Time Wizard's effect, especially considering one of the important aspects of the original Yu-Gi-Oh! You seem to have forgotten about in this short time. Namely that the Pharaoh is the one dueling Joey. As in, not Yugi. Yugi's the one who gave Joey the card in the first place, and when he did, nothing about the synergy with Baby Dragon was ever mentioned. So it could be implied that Yugi himself did not know about this interaction with specific cards. And while Pharaoh may have known about it, but just kept to himself so that he could ensure victory down the line, which really wouldn't be out of character for him to do if you were to actually read the manga and know how much of an evil bastard he really is, we've got no real proof that that's the case. Come to think of it, since we're focusing on Duelist Kingdom so much here, a lot of what happens in that arc disproves what you say about the show not using planning. For example, Pharaoh setting Dark Magician to bait Weevil into attacking into Mirror Force, the interaction between Summon Skull and Mikey that resulted in him winning that duel. The only card that he might have top-decked in order to win his duel against Mako was Curse of Dragon, but it would have worked if it was Summon Skull anyway. All things that involve strengths in deck construction and prior planning. Come to think of it, why are all of your examples from the oldest show possible?
Who the fuck is the toughest guy in here?
That'd be me.
Picture an anime that's about a group of friends preparing for games at their local card shop and then gearing up for their first regional and then national tournaments. Studying opponents, reading the meta, going to booster set releases, and trying to build the newest decks by buying and trading cards with everybody else. A show with a structure not unlike a sports anime. Would it be as exciting as calling down the Egyptian gods onto the deck of a blimp to battle for the fate of the world? Maybe not in the same way, but with an emphasis on interpersonal drama and self-improvement, I could easily see it being as engaging as something like Haikyuu or Food Wars. Shokugeki no Soma actually provides a really good roadmap for this. There are a lot of similarities between the preparations for that show's cooking duels and the art of deck building. Though Soma mainly takes on opponents one-on-one instead of in a tournament setting, he still spends a lot of time analyzing their strategies and figuring out ways to counter them. The battle is really won before it even begins.
No, not really. Because the act of cooking is the equivalent to the card game, and the judgment is the final result. I'll give you that Kuro Basket is much more like what you're talking about, even though it's essentially a comedy anime. Shokugeki no Soma is the much better comparison of what I'm talking about. See, the stuff you're calling the prep time, that's the actual game in and of itself. The judgment is simply the result of that game. And almost every episode has something go wrong with what Soma is doing. That would be the point where the opponent interferes with your strategy. Much like many of the early games in the Yu-Gi-Oh! Anime, these interactions force Soma to change his strategy in mid-battle in order to come out on top. And that is what makes the tension. Again, you're not entirely wrong here, since a card game anime that treated the deck building with more credence than the game would be a different approach. But for one, I doubt it would have as big of an audience as you're making it out to be. And for two, the fact remains that your comparison isn't exactly one-to-one on what stage of competition Food Wars represents.
And anime fans love this dynamic in Food Wars. I put out a whole video about it last fall. Food Wars proves that this kind of conflict can be exciting. So does Baby Steps, which spends as much time focusing on Eita's preparation for tournaments and how he studies opponents as it does on the matches themselves. I'd love to see a TCG anime take on a similar approach to these shows, be it something more absurd set in a card game high school like Shokugeki no Soma, or a more realistic story where the entire world's economy and education system isn't based on a children's toy about friends at a local card shop having fun. Those details don't matter so much. The important thing is the focus on strategy and planning over luck and friendship or whatever.
Not only are you about to shoot your own argument in the foot, but since your primary example of a show doing this wrong was Duelist Kingdom arc, none of Yami Yugi's duels end by way of top deck answer in Duelist Kingdom. The answer is pretty much always on the board before he actually uses it. Well, either that or it's Bakura literally being the change of heart or some other bullshit like that. But the point is, it's more common for Joey to rely on luck in order to win than either incarnation of Yugi. Fuck. Them bringing up the power of friendship is just the equivalent of telling the other person to concentrate and figure out the solution. Don't believe me? The Japanese version of the Mai vs. Joey duel speaks volumes here. See, Yami keeps telling Joey in that version that the answer is seen but cannot be seen, which is a riddle he keeps trying to solve to come to the real solution to his problem throughout the duel. Friendship gets brought up as an answer to this question, and how does Joey respond to that when he thinks of it? by asking what the fuck that has to do with anything, you chuckle fuck.
I've seen exactly one anime come close to doing this right: Card Fight Vanguard. In the first 2 seasons, we actually see characters buying booster packs and even structure decks and rebuilding their strategies around the new cards they acquire. A lot of time is spent at local card shops playing small games and tournaments, leading into bigger events with higher stakes. We see proper deck engines in play and understand how they achieve victory. And we see the work that goes into these characters getting better at the game and eventually winning it. The characters even talk about the idea of a winning image or win condition as an essential part of deck building.
Okay, you haven't said anything wrong, but something I'd like to note that's gonna be super relevant in a few minutes. The first 2 seasons consist of 104 episodes total. Don't get why that's relevant, do ya? You'll see.
Not only is it interesting and unique to see a show focus on this, it also makes for really effective advertising. When I first saw Misaki stacking her deck with her Oracle Think Tank archetype, I distinctly remember thinking, I bet that would be a lot of fun to play, something that kind of gets lost when a show focuses on luck and world-threatening stakes with every game.
I mean, again, your go-to comparison has been Duelist Kingdom. It's not exactly something that's accurate to the gameplay of the game in question. Neither are any of the anime you listed at the beginning, with the exception of maybe WeCross, and even then you said that one's twist on the formula was great. See, this is what I'm proposing to you, sir. These other shows aren't less effective ads because of the heightened stakes, especially since, as you said, these stakes normally don't come into play until near the end of the season, but rather due to how inaccurate what they're doing, and for the most part, just they aren't very good players, especially considering the fact that the thing that impressed you is in the 3rd episode. Most of the shows you brought up haven't even fucking introduced a main antagonist at this point, with the exception of Yu-Gi-Oh! Because it wasn't supposed to be about the card game, for fuck's sake! Your Dungeon Dice Monsters, please, just right fuck!
Unfortunately, as its seasons go on, Card Fight slowly devolves into trips to alien planets and battles against an evil void that steals your soul if you lose at card games. It loses faith in the more grounded depiction of TCG play that set it apart from stuff like Yu-Gi-Oh!, eventually becoming just like those shows. And while it seems to have worked commercially, the show's been airing continuously since 2011, I can't be the only one who thinks that kinda sucks. Again, pointing to Shokugeki no Soma, a lot of people have been disappointed with the central arc for shifting the focus of the series from cooking the very best like no one ever cooked to this ideological battle for the soul of Totsuki Academy against the evil council of food villains. It's not necessarily bad, I enjoyed it a little bit, but it feels more anime than it needs to.
Oh, for fuck's sake, it's called escalation of stakes! Vanguard started with a national championship and moved to a world championship in the 2nd season. This is what we like to call television storytelling 101! I mean, you're basically saying these shows are bad because they aren't pure slice of life, because they never were to begin with! And Link Joker—
I get why shows have this focus. They're aimed at children, and it's easier to wow kids by showing them big, cool monsters sold at a corner store near you, battling each other for the fate of the world. But Vanguard proves that more grounded stories can work. And the success of sports anime like Haikyuu demonstrates that you really don't need big, dumb anime magic fights with massive stakes on a world-changing scale to keep kids engaged. Or adults, for that matter.
First of all, you of all people should know that Japanese animation very frequently markets to adults instead of kids, much more often than is done in the West. But you do kind of have a point about that in regards to card game shows. That being fucking said, your comparison is dog shit. See, while you have more ground to stand on in a show like Shokugeki no Soma, you kinda lose your footing when you start saying that sports anime are proof that a grounded show can work. Because when it comes to Card Fight Vanguard in particular, you're comparing its direction after 104 episodes to a series with only 60. Yeah, that's the thing about the vast majority of sports anime, and I do mean the vast majority. They only last for like 1 or 2 seasons. The only exception to this that even comes close to crossing my mind, especially when it comes to shonen, which is the majority genre for card game anime, and sports anime for that matter, is Prince of Tennis, but some could view that as the exception that proves the rule. Hell, even Hikaru no Go, the most grounded equivalent, only reached 74 episodes. Now, see, I'm a bit torn on this video in some ways. Well, yeah, a more limited run approach to the genre instead of a long runner would be interesting. It does feel like you're dismissing what makes a long-running anime actually work, or a long-running show in general work. There's always an escalation of stakes from season to season to the point where pride and winning a tournament become, well, just plain not enough. It's kind of like pro wrestling in a way. If you want to keep selling tickets, you have to make people think that what you're doing is bigger and better than what you did before now, and adding an extra layer of conflict is an effective way to do that. Most shows that run for long periods of time that don't do this are shows where what happens from one episode to the next has little to no consequence unless it's a season finale or season premiere. I would accept this as more of a video that really just shows your audience about TCGs through a different lens, if not for the fact that you don't seem to fully understand how those work either. I mean, sure, you do have some understanding. Yes, reading the metagame and building your deck to interact with that metagame is important, and so are concepts like knowing how your deck is supposed to win or having a proper engine to get your deck there. The problem, though, is that, for one, you seem to discount the fact that the majority of decks need multiple different winning board states in order to be consistent enough to compete, and that, well, aggro exists. I mean, you say that people wouldn't put a random collection of powerful cards in their decks, but that's exactly what decks like Abzan Good Stuff and Dark Jeskai from Khans of Tarkir Standard were, and again, there's an entire archetype of decks that's just about playing easy to summon creatures and turning them sideways before your opponent has enough time to create a board state at all. So having a deck with both Blackluster Soldier and Dark Magician? That's just a deck where you want to just play the biggest thing you can and kill your opponent faster than they can even get going. Or a deck that uses the synergies between warriors and spellcasters to make their numbers too big to deal with, you know, also that. A-Forces exists. And I can tell you for a fact that games aren't won before you sit down at the table. Well, yes, the fact that I came up with Big Boros to counter Black Devotion for Born of the Guard's standard Star City event was a reaction to the metagame. I still had to pilot my deck correctly in order to reach top 8, and I still needed to top deck a second Burning Earth in Game 2 in order to beat the Mirror in the second to last round of Swiss. And I had all the preparation in the world when I sent out Crobat Lugia in Tennessee's state championship in Pokemon, knowing I had an excellent matchup against pretty much everything in the meta except Big Basic, and even then I had tech ready for that. But as fate would have it, either through a lack of the right draws or getting flustered at the bad luck I'd been having elsewhere, I did poorly. I've got plenty more examples of how either having my deck properly built didn't help me, or how I beat decks that most would say I have a bad matchup against due to strategic maneuvers, and yes, sometimes a well-timed top deck, but I think you get the point by now. I don't think you'd ever listen to my advice since you've got a good thing going for yourself, but I'm gonna give it anyway. Have a better grasp on what you're talking about before you do it. I'm shocked at how much stuff about anime, especially Yu-Gi-Oh! Of all things, that you missed, but that's probably because it's, well, not your genre, and that's fine. Your understanding of card games, though, is really only cursory. You did say that you spent 4 years with Yu-Gi-Oh! And Hearthstone, but I spent about 19 years on games like Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh!, Magic, Dragon Ball Z, Gundam MF, Swore, Card Fight, Vanguard, Future Card, Buddy Fight, Vice Schwartz, Hearthstone, Hex, Faria, and that's just the ones I can remember off the top of my head that I did more with than just buy a starter deck. And I still don't claim to be the be-all, end-all on the subject. I've told you what information isn't really all that accurate, and I'd hope that when you step outside of just talking about anime, you take my advice and do a little bit more research, even if you think you're an expert on the subject. Hell, I sure as hell did.
That seems like a good commentary. Alright, I'll be your avatar for that.
Great!
I already uploaded the video.
Why you gotta be a snitch, G?
Look, this is stupid. You're both stupid. You need to get a job. I don't think I need to tell you what you need to do right now. And I need a drink.
You're a ghost.
You heard me! Really sorry about this, by the way.
You already said that.
Oh, sorry about that.
God, you know, you'd probably kill me a lot faster if you would stop fucking apologizing.
Yeah, so...
so mad. I get so mad. I'm recording this like with a sore throat too. God, I hate myself. Apparently. I apparently do.